and the Seabees in North Kingston. The good news is, over the past 35 plus years, and Senator Pell coined this just right, we just simply swapped swabbies for scientists. So even though we are not an Atlantic Fleet surface ship-centered Navy investment operation, we are now United States War College and the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, centers of excellence for officer training and underwater research. An electric boat is now centered at Quonset and growing at Quonset substantially. And a company called Raytheon up the street in Portsmouth is centered in Rhode Island and growing in Rhode Island. And because of the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, which is a $1 billion a year operation, annual operation, think of that. The Naval Undersea Warfare Center, which we all take for granted on this island, I know, and in this state, is a $1 billion a year operation. And Dorothy Reynolds is working overtime. We need to give her more resource support so she can connect more Rhode Island businesses to the supply chain in federal procurement and opportunities that are spinning off from the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. John, what's the annual supply contracts, vendor contracts of Newark?
It's a little over
$500 million a year. And we have 100 companies that are directly associated as engineering, design, and management support to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, and growing. That is an industry cluster that is centered here, and it's an industry cluster for the most part, and this is going to be my one Newport County versus Providence County joke. As everyone says that we are building a knowledge-based economy in Providence, the reality is what's going on in the Jewelry District is really a life science district, anchored by Brown Medical School, Lifespan, and the cluster of health and education institutions. The real knowledge district is right down here. We could actually call Aquidneck Island Silicon Island because, again, we've got one of the largest concentration clusters of software engineering computer companies right here in this island, but for the most part, their core competencies has been defense work. The opportunity tomorrow is to extend those competencies into commercial applications. So that's right here. It's an industry that's here. It's growing with the good work of John and others through the base realignment closure process in 2005. They're going to be here to stay. And then one of the spin-offs, which is a great asset and an opportunity, is that as we've realigned the Navy bases and they've become more compact, more focused on their core competencies of officer training and undersea research, they are now have a plan working with our Aquidneck Island Planning Commission to access over 200 acres, mostly waterfront property, that will be available for the communities for their long-term economic reinvestment strategies and plan. And our West Side Master Plan is one of the best in the nation. It is a well-thought-out, well-designed plan that will allow the communities in the state to work collaboratively to acquire this land and bring it back as mixed-use, economic, and public benefit uses. Now, some of the other quick, important industries that will be growing we should be watching very carefully. One is the marine services and the marine trades. I mean, when we talk about playing to our strengths, isn't it Narragansett Bay? It's the one thing we have, and it's the one thing that has benefited us as an economic asset for at least the first 400 years. And today, going forward, we now see a bay which is much cleaner because of the work of Save the Bay and many advocates. But even more importantly, we're beginning to have dialogue about creating more of a strategic economic development plan for the bay that begins to recognize and, most importantly, integrate our bay, and particularly our bay marine trade assets. Now, again, and I'll say this for the fourth time, we're not Texas, we're not California, but we should have had more of an integrated philosophy and strategy of supporting our industrial bay assets. Since 1983, because of changes in the marketplace and land use changes, we've lost a number of marine assets within the state, meaning shipyards, marine areas. We've lost that. They've been converted to more lifestyle, mixed-use, residential-based properties, and that's okay, because that was a decision that was made publicly and made deliberately. I mean, one of the tensions that I see in economic development between states and cities and towns is that for the most part, states measure economic development in jobs, in the wealth that's created through jobs. But cities and towns, at the end of the day, they really recognize economic development in property tax value. That's the only way they can raise revenue to manage their communities. So what you've seen in the last 25 to 30 years, actually I can give you the date, 1992, with the enactment of the Comprehensive Land Use Act, which further empowered cities and towns and really charged cities and towns to come up with definable land use plans and policies. And what you found at that time was many of the coastal communities decided, here's an opportunity to begin to rezone, replan, rethink our coastal waterways. And you know what? Taxes is a little bit more important to us than jobs, because we need those taxes to underwrite our schools and to underwrite our public infrastructure and our public safety operations. So what happened during that time frame? Even my own community of Newport, we had 4 working shipyards just 30 years ago. Now we have 1, which is really not a shipyard, it's more of a mega yacht marine service facility. And we're certainly not doing the working jobs that shipyards really been come to known by. The painting, the sandblasting, the carpentry work, all the things that were valuable to have a working shipyard have been lost for the most part. And we've seen this play out in Bristol, Warwick, you name it, coastal communities, East Providence. They're moving away from intensified marine industrial land uses and more towards lifestyle mixed use. And again, the policy is the tax value is so much greater. But we lost those jobs. And we lost a bit of our edge in the marine trade industry. And that's something will play out if somebody asks me a question about America's Cup, because it has less to do of history and sailing waters and more to do of our capacity to service and support of industry in an event of this size and scale. So one of the things that we're now doing, which should have been done before, but we're doing it today, is we're recognizing that our marine industrial trade industry is an important one, it's a competitive one, and we need to identify critically well-defined and integrated sites where we can build and support this industry. And those sites are Quonset-Davisville, Port of Providence, and what we loosely call the Melville Marine Trade Area here in Portsmouth. And here in the East Bay side, the Melville Marine Trade Area is really a cluster of boat building, and even more importantly, restoration and off-season service and marina operations, and it fits the fiberglass and it fits the operations within that trade. Quonset is more of an industrial marine port, and Port of Providence is a very industrial barge marine port facility. We need to have an integrated port plan and marine industrial plan that integrates all 3 of those areas, protects all 3 of those areas, and in that plan creates a long-term strategic investment so that those areas have proper facilities, proper upland operations, and most importantly, from a land use and planning standpoint, are protected and preserved in perpetuity as singly marine trade industrial areas. People can live and enjoy the beaches in many, many, many locations in the state. We just want to keep 3 for the marine trade industries. And I think those 3 locations are absolutely at the right time and the right place for that investment and strategy. And I want to go on and talk a little bit more about Quonset, about how important that is. Quonset-Davisville today, and John and I years ago worked on Quonset in the Sunland administration in BRAC 1991. And I got to tell you, it was a wasteland and it was a challenge. And when the Navy turns over properties, or if the Department of Defense turns over properties, they kind of just turn it over as is. They give you the keys, it's like a clunker, they give you the keys and they walk away. And then we are challenged with not only the acquisition and not only the utility investments and enhancements, but the environmental remediation. And I can tell you that Quonset-Davisville, after 20 years and over $100 million of public, federal, state investment, today there is over 168 companies employing nearly 10,000 people at Quonset-Davisville. And if you haven't been there, one of the challenges I have as chairman of the board, we have less than 500 acres, really developable acres, that is really left in the Quonset side. We have more in West Davisville, but we've been busy and we've been successful. And we've got some great announcements from existing companies there, particularly Ocean State Job Lot and Electric Boat, who are growing and prospering. And last month, the work of the staff at Quonset, we were one of only several states to receive what's called a TIGER grant, a transportation investment grant of $22.5 million that will allow us to improve our bulkhead, some minor dredging, to purchase cranes, and to really begin to drive Quonset forward in 2 very important industries. One, and I will tell you today, we are going to move forward with deep water wind and the opportunity of having an offshore renewable energy solution to the state of Rhode Island. We will go forth with that. But what's even more important, the long run, it's renewable energy and lower electricity costs. In the short run, the contract that we have with Deepwater Wind and their partners is that the fabrication and the building of these turbine systems, the assembly of those systems, and then the ongoing work and operation will be done at Quonset-Davisville. It'll be one of the first times in my lifetime that we can reclaim manufacturing industry, a green manufacturing economy, and we have nearly 800 full-time jobs associated with that. Not in Mass, not in New Jersey, not in Connecticut, but in Rhode Island at Quonset-Davisville. We've set aside 117 acres for that purpose. And this TIGER grant will allow us to build out the very important amenities facilities to support this effort. And then